Very good morning to all of you. Thank you, Gerald, for that previous session. And well done on wrapping up on time. Um, we have a very interesting discussion now for the next panel discussion, the increasing correlation between resilience, sustainability, and investing in travel and tourism. Travel and tourism is a $2 trillion industry globally. But as the pressure on climate change and the need for businesses to adapt when it comes to sustainability increases, the focus is now on the travel and tourism industry as to how are they going to adapt in this rapidly changing environment with tangible targets and also timeline delivery. It's not an easy job, but there are people who are on the forefront to achieve those targets. So we'll be finding out what are the exact steps being taken, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and what is really achievable as the industry races against time to achieve those targets. And I have a very distinguished panel to discuss this with me, and I'll be inviting them on stage. Can I have Mr. Donovan White, who's the CEO of Jamaica's Tourism Board? I'm good. Mr. Raki Phillips, who's the CEO of Khaimah Tourism Development Board. Mr. El-Kady, who's the CEO of Egyptian Tourism Promotion Board. Hello, sir.
How are you?
Dr. Abed Al-Razzaq Arabiyat, who's the Managing Director of Jordan Tourism Board. Mr. Maher Abou Nasr, who's the Vice President Operations for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for ISG. Last but not the least, Mr. Hamza Farooqui, who's the founder and CEO for Millat Investments. So we have a packed panel this morning. This is a diverse set of people working in the tourism and travel industry, but in different aspects. So I'm expecting to get a wide range of views and also insights as to how these gentlemen and their companies and their boards are working towards achieving this target. Now, let's begin. I know it's a big panel and we have just 45 minutes. So I'm going to request all of you to keep your points a little concise so that we can get more topics in. But I want to begin by asking all of you to answer in one line, just one line, and then we'll elaborate on those points about what do you see the biggest challenge for the travel and tourism industry when it comes to achieving resilience, sustainability, and also investments in travel and tourism. Just one line to begin with. So I'll begin with you, sir. Why don't you start? And then we'll just go on, and then we'll elaborate those points.
It's a great pleasure to be among this distinguished and our valuable friends from the tourism boards, just to discuss the very important subject, which is the resilience and responsible tourism and the climate change. Now it became a big challenge for destinations. I think regulations, policies, education, awareness, and the most important thing that the businesses and travelers know how to calculate their contribution to the carbon emissions and how to convert to responsible tourism, which is now it's a vital and essential factor in the tourism industry. Just one line, so can you elaborate more?
Yeah, no, I'll come back to you.
Sure.
So we got the bullet point from you. As you mentioned, that's one of the big challenges. And how do you achieve that? I'll come to Mr. White.
Yes.
What do you see as a big challenge?
I think that first of all, great to be on the panel and welcome to everyone. I think the clarity of purpose of our industry and the makeup of our industry between the public sector and the private sector, and the incoherence sometimes of policies and regulations and how they intertwine between both the private and the public sector, and finding that common ground where policy coherence creates the kind of infrastructure, the kind of leveling of the playing field, if you will, to ensure that the development of our tourism products can serve the needs of the discerning public in a way that brings value to our various geographies and to the industry overall.
Okay, that's an interesting point you have raised. I'll come to Raki quickly now. What
Yeah,
do you see from the Middle East's point of view, or the
So
start?
good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I think there's three key things to be able that need to be aligned. One is customer expectations. Customers' needs from a greener environment and greener travel is growing on a regular basis. Second is public government policies related to green energy and how to travel sustainably. And the third is to be able to motivate owners and investors to see the returns that they need from a long-term perspective and the importance of doing that. Getting those three aligned at the same pace is I think, a challenge.
Mr. El-Kady, yeah, your views on this.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for hosting us here today. I'll talk about in brief about the sustainability. I believe it is a global mission. So it requires a lot of knowledge sharing on global level, working together because we are in this planet, only on this planet together. So it won't happen unless we really work together and share all the knowledge and information required and the legal work frames and other stuff and practices. So the global cooperation is key here.
Global cooperation, okay, that's important. Mr. Nasr,
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I think my colleagues covered it all. I just want to emphasize 2 points here. First is creating platforms for reaching alignment across the private and public sectors to create that collaboration platform. And I think the second one is finding those metrics that would help us all measure in an equal way all the efforts regarding sustainability, because that will drive investment towards those measuring points.
okay. Mr. Farooqui, I know you're the last one, sorry for that, and a lot of has been covered, but anything you think that has got missed out and probably needs attention when it comes to the challenges?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I have a very simple one-word answer. People. We are so obsessed around sustainability and green and climate, which is all very important, but we forget the most important matrix. And to answer your question in one word, it's people. It's the people which are going to bring the resilience. It's the people which are going to bring the policy. It's the people which is the heart of our business. And if that's great, the entire ecosystem works. So I think for me, beyond policy, people, collaboration, the most important thing is people. And if that works, then I think resilience and everything around sustainability is a lot more achievable.
Well, that's a very interesting point you raised, people, which is really at the heart of any action you want to achieve. I'll come back to you, sir, Mr. Arabiyat. As a tourism board, when you are looking at an overall strategy and given the challenges and also opportunities probably, what is a realistic strategy that you can adapt to achieve the desired objects when it comes to achieving whether it's sustainability and also growing investments into sustainable tourism?
Thank you. I think just going back to the main pillars, the main factors in terms of the climate change, the carbon print, and all these things related to the tourism. You need to educate. You need to do how to calculate. So if you want to reduce, you need your carbon emissions and the pollution. You need to be aware how you every single step and what is the practices that will will contribute to the emissions. So again, people is very important. You just to educate them, both the businesses and the travelers. So the calculator is very important. Awareness very important. So we put that in the strategy, and I think one of the things that we are, as Jordan, we put some incentives for the businesses. Incentives, we give you an example. When you, as a tourism board, when you host a fam trip or press trip or influencers, it's good now. We will have adopted a strategy that the plastic bottle is not allowed. So you will give him this can or bottle which is steel that will be within the whole trip. So you reduce the plastic, let's say, water bottles. The other thing, we'll give incentive to the hotels where we send our fam trips and influencers to the businesses and the supply chain who are adhere to the let's say green tourism, responsible tourism. They are contributing and they know exactly how to deal with this. So they can contribute to the ecosystem. Also, we will give some incentive of participation in the exhibitions. You will give him a discount for the tour operators or the hotels or the businesses that adopting this strategy. So incentives is very important in addition to the education to work together and coordinate. But at the end of the day, the policies and education and training is very important for both, for businesses and for the travelers, will reach to be more resilient, go to the reach to the eco-friendly environment, green tourism, and responsible tourism.
Okay, so you gave some examples like not using plastic and things like that, and I want to get you in, Mr. White. I mean, again, extending that question, when you are a tourism board and you have to come up with an overall strategy, have you all been trying? Are there examples you can share where you have tried something, things that have worked and things which probably haven't so far?
Yeah, there's a specific correlation to the point I raised before as it relates to policy coherence, because oftentimes in industries like ours, the public sector side of things, which is the government, drives the policy framework, drives the infrastructure, drives the investment climate simply by the levels or the kinds of policies that they seek to implement, and specifically around sustainability and investments. We have looked at, for example, how do we create an ecosystem around the industry that makes it encouraged by other participants in the economy, because tourism is a linkages industry. Tourism is such a it's an ecosystem that drives on everything else in the economy, and as a result of that, if you don't have the right policy frameworks, then investors will not see or be able to seize the opportunities that exist in the industries around them to create the kind of investment framework that drives those kinds of projects, to drive sustainability and indeed to drive resilience of the industry. So from our perspective, linkages has been one of the key drivers of our sustainability, simply because it creates the framework for investors in other industries that support tourism to find interesting ways of being involved in tourism from the perspective of whether it's dealing with energy issues, dealing with agricultural issues, dealing with training, learning and development issues, that all are endemic issues to tourism that tourism can't fix by itself, if you understand what I mean. So it really is having the kind of policy coherence at the government level that engages and incentivizes the private sector to be able to find the kind of resources to put into tourism in a way that drives the overall economy.
Raki, Mr. White raised an important point about policy framework. Now, in your case, when I say your case for Ras Al Khaimah, it's an emerging tourist destination. It's not one of the traditional ones. So how challenging is it for an emerging tourist destination to adapt to this new framework where you have to meet certain norms, sustainable norms, environment-friendly ecosystem? And how challenging is it to attract investments then? Because here you have a strategy over the last 10 years to build a new destination, and now there are new goals you need to achieve.
I think being what we like to call a destination of the future, an emerging destination, I think it's easier. We have less bureaucracy, we have less red tape, things move a lot faster as a smaller destination, which allows us to put policies and procedures in place that benefit the investor, the consumer, and the overall government. So I'd like to say that for us, we're able to move things a lot faster. So what we did in Ras Al Khaimah is we did a pledge to be the first certified sustainable destination in the region, and we worked with a company called EarthCheck that helped us put together the policies that are required to do that, and 30 entities within the Emirate of Ras Al Khaimah signed the pledge to be able to meet that. And when you touch base on investment, last year Ras Al Khaimah announced the largest FDI that ever came into the Emirate, with Wynn Integrated Resort announcing a $3.9 billion investment. Now, the nice thing about that is when you look at a company like Wynn and you say this is a mega publicly traded company, 70% of their hotels run on renewable energy, and their hotels have thousands of rooms. So we can learn how to be able to develop projects in a sustainable way, and being a smaller destination allows us to do this much faster.
That's an interesting point. And taking that point to Mr. El-Kady, I mean, Raki raised a very important point that it's easier for them because it's an emerging destination. For Egypt, it's a different story. It's an established tourism hub. How challenging is it? Is it more challenging for established destinations?
Yeah, of course. We've been in this business for more than 100 years. So you can imagine the kind of challenges that we face in the infrastructure, on the people itself, because it's a kind of a cultural change, definitely. So a lot have been said about the education, including ourselves at the ministerial level or at the authority level. We need to be well educated first to be able to educate the others and take this process forward. And yes, of course, because Egypt is fairly big in geography, and with the resorts and the touristic destination scattered across the country. But another thing is, wherever we dig in the soils of Egypt, we have archaeological finds. And that is actually one of the most important things that we have to look for sustainability as well. Because we realize now that even visitation for museums can positively or negatively affect the artifacts themselves unless we have a sustainability planning for them. So it's not only about the tourism, it's about the antiquities as well. And this cultural heritage that goes like 5,000-6,000 years old, we have to really be careful about it. So it's very challenging. And definitely with the limited resources, I say limited resources financially, to the challenging positions that we are. So it's really challenging, and we are struggling doing that. But we started already. We started by, first, as I said, educating ourselves. Second, by getting engaged with international community about how to take this process seriously and adapting whatever the world is having, and benefiting from the natural resources that we have. From the sun, we have 365 days of sunshine, and of course from the wind. So we're working hard on the renewable energy, and I think we'll be there by like 5 years from now.
You raised a very interesting point about financing, and that's where I want to get you in, Mr. Nasr. You're the only hotel voice on this panel. So it's, from a hotel's perspective, how challenging is it to raise finance or finance projects which are focused on sustainable and building this new infrastructure ecosystem, especially for big hotel chains like yours? I know you're operating in KSA, which you're expanding over there, but even then you have existing properties there, and now you will be introducing new ones. Of course, it must be easier slightly for new ones, but how challenging is the financing aspect and also simultaneously making changes to existing properties?
That's a very good question. It's getting better, I guess the answer is. We see a lot of awareness from governments now and more support to initiatives coming from hotel operators towards new build hotels. We have 1,800 hotels in our pipeline as IHG, and we know we're not going to be building those hotels the same way we built the existing 6,000 properties that we have in our portfolio. So I guess it was mentioned before, there's a lot of collaboration in that front. Who pays for that investment? Our role as operators is to come up with what the product should look like from a sustainability point of view. And at the end of the day, with incentives from governments, as my colleagues mentioned, we can reach there. Case in point is what we're doing in Saudi Arabia, for example, in the location of Red Sea. We're fortunate to be part of that development, which is a net zero destination. with two properties there, the Intercontinental and the Six Senses product. So we see it getting better. Now, to answer the second part around renovations, it's a longer journey because the investments are slightly more, there's a bigger burden on the investors. So we're working with governments across the region to find ways either to provide funding at a reasonable cost or to give more incentives for developers to build. We have to keep in mind that the cost is short term. On the long term, once we spend that money today, in the long term, everybody will be winning, and particularly our environment.
Mr. Farooqui, you know, one of the points that comes out is that financing is a challenge right now at this stage. And from an investor's point of view, how attractive are projects, these green projects, when it comes to hospitality or travel, when you know that the cost is high, there's still challenges on financing, and also questions about viability, because it might vary from country to country. Some countries, the governments may be able to give more support, but in many, the industry might not get the same kind of support, whether it's logistical, financing, or other aspects. From an investor's point of view, how challenging is it to then pick up or back these projects, and how do you think this can be changed?
So, in my view, I think we have to take a very honest look. We have to be very honest and say green financing, all of these have actually been hugely opportunistic. Capital providers only look at it when there's either easy DFI-led capital available. So if the IFC is going to give me a cheap denominated loan, then I'll go out and I'll get EDGE or LEED certification. But I can assure you in the region, there's probably very few capital providers who go out of their way, who are saying, well, the hotel brand standard wants me to meet A, B, C, D, because that isn't there. So we have got to be very honest. There isn't sort of green financing doesn't automatically mean that the project becomes more viable. I actually think we're still very opportunistic about it. I also think hotel brands haven't sort of gone out and made brand standards easier for any kind of real element of sustainability. I think for everyone in the ecosystem, it's been, well, if it's a nice to have, we'll do it. If it's if it's available, it's there. So I think there isn't that concerted effort. I also think the more you're going to go into green and sustainability, you have to start questioning payback periods, because it's all great to have this expensive capex solar, but at the end of the day, it's adding a capex line which has a payback period which starts pushing out 5 to 7 years out. I'll give you an example. In South Africa, we have huge energy crises. But when you look at the matrix of actually deploying these capex intensive items, those savings and paybacks don't really come up. So I think there's a real concerted need. We do need to look at green. We do need to look at how we reduce the carbon emissions. But I think the industry needs to look at it more than just a talk shop, and I think has to make a real concerted effort. And I think, frankly, everyone in the industry is hugely opportunistic about it. If it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, it's nice. And I think the moment that shift happens regionally, that shift happens, then I think there's something meaningful to look forward to.
It's a very interesting point you raised about everyone looking at this as an opportunity rather than a mission because of the ground realities. And in that case, coming to you, sir, Mr. Arabiyat, what can governments or boards do? Because there is a recognition that sustainability is required and needed, but the ground realities are challenging. What can the regulators do? Can they, put more regulation? Can they put more oversight? Can they make the conditions more tougher? Because that would impact business. So how do you do the balancing act where you have to put the conditions in place so that the industry moves towards that goal of achieving sustainability, but at the same time, you need to balance it when it comes to the ground realities like financing and making those projects viable?
I agree with you. It's a challenge for the governments and the regulators to balance between the investment opportunities and to stick to the very restrictions of the environmental, let's say, policies. I'll give you an example. One of the things under the definition of the responsible tourism, resilience, and eco-friendly tourism over tourism. Now, I think many of the sites are suffering from the over-tourism, which is not affecting the sites. So this is, we need to find site management plans just to manage the flow to the sites. So they have to put these policies. The other thing, access to the funds. As you said, it's very important to give more incentives to the businesses that they have more access and the preferential interest rate for the businesses that they are adapting the eco-friendly policies. One of the things that they put the licensing or renewal the license, that you need to adhere and to stick to the regulations and the prerequisites from your side to be within the system and to adhere to the policies. As I said, incentives are very important, and to enforce now the supply chain to convert to clean energy, just to adopt the solar panels and how to manage the sewage water, the grey water, and the reduce using the plastics and the things that will add more to the emissions and the pollution. So climate change now, it's became a global issue, and I think not one government. I think it will be unified efforts where to be a global policies and regulations to be adopted among all the supply chains worldwide. It's not just one country, because you can't just adopt a policy in Jordan without Egypt or without other countries. So COP28 now that will take place in UAE, I think all the leaders, the political leaders, will come up with recommendations that be adopted by all the governments, and they will stick to it. So it's a global, as my friend Amr from Egypt said, it's a global issue. It's not one country call. Again, how to find the balance? Yes, nowadays experiential tourism, the local community, how they just manage the flow, how you distribute the tourism flow among the other sites. So the concentration in one site also will affect the site itself, and will maybe ruin the whole policies. This is just in a nutshell what I want to share with you. Thank you.
Mr. White, I mean, one of the points which Mr. Arabiyat raised was the balancing act, right? But then one of the points which we heard, which Mr. Nasr was also mentioning, is the financing, especially in the short term.
Yeah.
How do you balance, as in how do you, on one hand you are trying to incentivize the private sector to make investments, but then the reality is they can't handle this pressure, financial pressure on their own. So can the government step in to pay, or can it be an even split, or a system where it reduces the burden on the private sector and the government is able to incentivize for them by chipping in at least at the early stages? Or do you think even the governments, not all governments possibly can achieve that because of the challenges on financing?
I'm glad you asked that question, and I just want to quickly reference my colleague at the end for the point made about being honest about where we are, and the fact that we are still driven largely by a private sector environment that is driven themselves by being profitable. It's what the private sector does, right? And so one of the things we recognized is in our space, 80% of the tourism businesses are MSMEs. They're relatively medium-sized and small businesses. And the level of sophistication and scale that they are able to provide for financing and for attracting investment is oftentimes limited because and don't present the kind of opportunity for financing and for investment houses to see them as broad-based opportunities that they want to back. And so one of the things that the government did is to create a fund of $1 billion with the Exim Bank, which is the Export-Import Bank, as a closed fund accessible by medium and small enterprises within the tourism space, specific for sustainability projects. So going green or doing any other kinds of projects within their environment or within their businesses that will lead to sustainability of the industry is the prerequisite for accessing monies from this fund. What that has done is it allows for funding to be accessible, one, funding to be accessible at lower than normal commercial rates, and thirdly, funding to be accessible over longer tenures, which gives the opportunity to the borrower to have more time to execute one, but more importantly, more time to do the projects properly, so that they are indeed being able to serve the industry over longer periods and in a more sustainable way. So it is part of what I said earlier. I keep going back to it because I think it was so important that we ensure that when we create policy and indeed legislative and regulatory frameworks, that they are coherent to the people to which they're intended, which is our private sector partners. But more importantly, it is also coherent to understand the need to be compliant, because compliance means for us that we are doing all the things we need to do in the regulatory framework to make the industry better, to make it more sustainable, to make it more agnostic to changes and to the traverse of time. And from that, and so it gives us that confidence that the people that matter within our space, they understand they're thought about in a way that allows them to continually develop, redevelop, and indeed expand and carry their businesses forward in a way that makes our industry works and perform as our leading industry in the country.
Raki, taking that point forward, because as in your case, as you said, it's slightly easier. Have you seen the same when it comes to financing, or do you think there is a need from your company to push private sector or provide them the kind of financial support or instrument, give them financial solutions to be able to take on those projects?
No, absolutely. We have to support the industry. I mean, the tourism industry runs, it's a very volatile industry, but has done really well post-pandemic. But when the pandemic hit, we had a stimulus package that supported the local non-government-owned businesses. And what we did is the tourism dirham and the tax that we collect, we were able to allow part of it to be reinvested back into the hotels, so the operators would be able to keep it. So no, I think as a government entity, we should be able to support and drive that investment to the local community. But I also, when you look at Jordan or Egypt that has significant years of history, Ras Al Khaimah also has history, maybe not as long as theirs, but our cultural and heritage community is so important to us, and we have 4 sites that are on the tentative UNESCO heritage list, and we've learned how to be able to restore them with our antiquities team, cultural antiquities team, and be able to work with the communities that are there to allow them to thrive and do things. But we need to put the policies in place to make sure that it is robust, it is not prohibitive to doing business, and make it easy for investors to be able to come to us.
Coming to you, sir. I mean, Egypt. When you spoke about challenges when you are looking at established destination like Egypt. But your job is also to make sure that these goals are, these plans are implemented, and you hold the industry accountable for it. Now, one of the things, I was reading a very interesting statistic which said that larger companies are reporting, more when it comes to green projects. I think it's about 80%. 80% are SMEs and 20% are large organizations. This is the global picture I'm giving you. It's much more challenging for the smaller and medium-sized enterprises. So how do you make them more accountable? And secondly, make sure that they are able to implement, the changes that are required on the ground?
It's the continuous dialogue between us and them, and we continue to discuss and explain to everyone what is the importance of, again, working together. Working together is the answer for all the questions. By laws, by frameworks, and by incentives as well. And by getting so much of international cooperation communities, having some funds and low interest rates to them, so that they can really participate in the economy and the way that everybody is actually looking for. That's in a nutshell, because I can see we're running out of time.
We are very short on time, so I'm just going to quickly come to you, Mr. Nasr. How do you see the way ahead, especially for large organizations like yours? In the short term, there is a challenge. Yes, financing. But at the same time, you have to keep growing. So from a hotel's point of view, how do you see that balance to achieve greener projects, but at the same time, make sure that it doesn't impact growth?
Yeah, well, I think the way we're developing hotels is changing moving forward. It's the heart of how we are building new hotels. We've created a vision in 2021, which is a long-term journey to achieve our goals, and all our work is aligned with that vision. So today we have Journey to Tomorrow, which addresses people as well as community and the planet. So we're going towards eco-friendly operations. We're going towards less waste in our hotels, and no single-use items. So we're heading there. We're more aware on the energy we're spending and the water we're spending. So that's going to continue with us for sure. It's mandated by our customers. More than 90% of our global accounts ask our hotels what they're doing towards the planet for them to make the decision on where they are staying. So that's being mandated for us moving forward.
I'll give you, Mr. Farooqui, the last word, since we've run out of time completely. Really, you said, one of the things you said earlier was it's important to be honest. So let's be realistic in the end. Let's look at the next 10 years. Where do you see the industry in terms of where do you see that the industry will be able to make progress? And where do you see it's going to face the biggest challenge, if you want to probably break that up?
So I think, again, it's going to come down to where I started. If, with what we've gone on with COVID, if we take that as a learning base and we very simply go back to the basics around nurturing people, creating the culture set, and building that people centricity in that ecosystem, customers will start understanding the need for green sustainability. People, HR across the board will. I think if that gets nurtured in sort of organizations, private sector, public policy, then I think our industry is in for a great run in the next 10, 15 years. But if we forget that, then I think we're going to have a major challenge.
Well, those are very important words from Mr. Farooqui, and I think that's a good point to end this discussion on. A lot of challenges, but yes, there are opportunities as well, as illustrated. And before we end the discussion, I would now like to invite Mr. Edmund Bartlett, the Minister of Tourism for Jamaica, on stage, who's joining us for concluding remarks. Hello, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you, Hashmi.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Hashmi. Thank you, panelists. I'm sorry that I didn't have the opportunity to hear all of it. I was double dating a little bit here. And so I'm just rushing from that one to here. But I wanted to indicate that this is a very important moment, I think, for us in tourism and for the examination of the supply chain arrangements and what are the key drivers that are going to enable us to bring back that level of sustainable supply arrangements to enable the industry to continue to fulfill its role as being a driver of economic growth and development and a provider of well-being for millions and millions of people, indeed billions now of people across the world. Tourism is the fastest recovering industry in the world today since the pandemic. And in our case in the Caribbean, we are the fastest growing recovering region in the world for tourism. And my own country, Jamaica, we are now fully recovered, as I'm sure that Donovan told you earlier on, and that we're now looking at growth beyond 2019. But growth has to be in consonance with sustainability. And sustainability for us is not just about building in consonance with nature. It's about building people, because tourism is about people. That's all we do. 1.4 billion of us went to meet with a few more billions of us across the planet Earth. And in the process, we spent $9 trillion. But who got that $9 trillion is of interest. And we want to make sure that the beneficiaries of tourism are the drivers of tourism and the real owners of tourism. And I heard you mention the small and medium enterprises. And we have inserted a T in that acronym, not SMT, but now SMTEs. That is small and medium tourism enterprises. So the investment in the SMTEs is a guarantee that the 80% of tourism that they represent will provide a similar return to them, and not the 20% of the returns of tourism that they now have. So that asymmetry we have to reverse. And so as we encourage investments, yes, we encourage big investments. We want large hotels, yes. We want large factories. We want large farms. But we also want to build the capacity of the real drivers of tourism, the small and medium enterprises. And finally, I want to indicate that the big discussion about sustainability revolves around climate change and climate change activities. Tourism is about the environment. The environment is the product. That's what we sell in tourism. Without the environment, there is no tourism. So tourism has a responsibility to being the real custodian of climate management. And we must contribute. The 1.4 billion of us who traveled across the world in 2019, and it's going to be more, we represented something near 8% of the carbon footprints. So we are the most consumption-driven entity and activity on planet Earth. That's all we do, we consume. And at every point in consumption, we're also consuming carbon. How do we pay? And tourism has a responsibility not to pay, but to contribute. And I'm suggesting that there's need for a resilience fund to be established, which the tourism sector can be responsible for. Forget the L&Ds. Forget the RS&T that the IMF has. Those are trillions and trillions of dollars. We can't go there. But each of us as individuals can contribute a tip throughout our movement across the globe. And when we do that, that money stays in the destination that we visit. And it becomes a pool of funds for mitigation, for adaptation, and for recovery activities after disruptions. So I leave that with you. As we go to COP28, put tourism at the table. Let us start the discussion and the debate as being the responsible partner in the climate change discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for your wise words, especially about tourism and environment. Without environment, there's no tourism. Well, I think that's a good point to end this discussion on. I want to thank all my panelists on stage for sharing their insights on such a critical subject. Thank you so much for your time, and a big round of applause for all these panelists, please.